Hello, everyone. The voice of reason here. I just wanted to stop in and remind you that right now, our very own writer of wrongs, J.F. Dubois, has a new book out. Song of the Sandman, the sequel to A God in the Shed, is now available in paperback, digital, and audiobook. And if you're in the U.S. and would like to help support both the show and indie booksellers, you can pick up JF's book and a lot of other cozy, horrific selections at the Aquilo Bookshop. Visit tiny.cc/Aquilo Bookshop to browse the offerings. And as always, thank you for listening. Aquilo Season 4 Chapter 8 Unusual. There's a bounce in my step and a dance to my walk as I tiptoe around the living room couch on my way out the door. The sun has yet to fully rise, manifesting as little more than a pale band of light the color of poached salmon on the horizon. With a velvet touch as smooth as chocolate mousse, I open the front door without so much as a click, all to avoid waking Stefan from his peaceful slumber. We haven't really talked in the last day, and part of me wonders if I'm simply avoiding fulfilling my promise to help him solve the mystery of Nancy's death. This afternoon, I promise myself. I just want the next few hours to pass without having to worry about the dangers of living in Aquilo. There's a song going through my head as I mix batter this morning. I'm going to make some apple caramel donuts. They're going to be delicious, and they're going to be the talk of the town. I usually hate peeling apples, but this morning the task almost feels like meditation. A quick glance at my Paul Martin recipe book to remind myself how to make sugar donuts, and I'm off to the races. I don't need anyone to tell me how to poach apples or perform the alchemy needed to turn sugar into caramel. A little improvisation will do me good. Stepping out of my usual habits, I switch on the sound system in the dining room and put on some poppy folk music before tackling my next project. Strips of pork tenderloin are pulled out of vacuum seal bags where they've been marinating for the night. I lay the pork on a bed of onions and mushrooms before sliding it all in the oven to roast for 20 minutes. These will be wrapped in tortillas with eggplant and bell peppers for the lunch crowd. I've made these before, and they're always a success, and for the first time in a while, I remember why. They smell amazing. On a whim, I whip up a batch of potato candies with peanut butter. Those will go on the counter next to the register. They're a great impulse purchase for those who usually just get a coffee to go. A little treat on their way to work. Finally, I give a longing, nearly sensual look at the waffle iron. I've been looking for the energy to make some stroopwafel, but as good as I feel this morning, it may not yet be the time. I sweep the floor and take a few extra pastries out back, laying them at the bottom of the stairs behind the cafe. The sun has crested the horizon and the sky is now deep blue while the clouds are painted in hues of pink and orange. It's going to be a nice day, and judging by the brisk temperature, one that isn't too warm or too cold. A baby bear kind of day. With minutes left before I unlock the door and welcome my first visitor, I'm left with one final choice. I've been dreading it while still looking forward to the opportunity. Optimism doesn't come easily to me, not these days, but for some reason, I feel like I could take on the world right now. And if I can take on the world, maybe, just maybe, I can make coffee without using the French press. "Hey, buddy," I whisper like a zookeeper trying to give a tiger his shots. "How about it? You and me." With effort, I go back to the very first time I used the bizarre contraption of wood and brass from which I'm supposed to extract coffee. I go over every step of each rare occasion when I was able to make a decent brew without burning my fingers or getting sprayed with scalding jets of steam. I grind my grounds and fill up the filter. I make sure the water levels are good, and I twist a variety of knobs and dials, half of which are a mystery to me. There are a couple of levers involved before I can put the pot under the spigot, and, with a prayer to God, the mother, and the cloud up above, I flip the switch. Bubbling and hissing, the machine starts its work. I squint, expecting burning liquid to hit my face, but nothing happens. As the noises intensify, A delicious aroma rises from the machine. Thin wisps of vapor escape the top of the device. But instead of the aggressive jets of scalding water, they're pleasant heralds of things to come. Have we found common ground? Or am I expected to wake up from what is clearly a dream? What smells so good? My first customer, quite appropriately, is Olivia Figg. She, too, seems to be in a chipper mood. Then again, she's not exactly the grumpy type. She leaves that to her husband, Henry. It's early for Olivia, though judging by her accoutrement, she has a busy day ahead of her. She's all business and ready to meet clients. Coffee, I say, with no small amount of triumph in my voice. Without a word, but speaking volumes with her arched eyebrows and smug smile, Olivia takes a seat at her usual place at the counter. You've tamed the beast? I wouldn't presume as much, but I think I'm starting to notice a pattern. She says, tapping the counter with her index finger like a gambler at a blackjack table. Hit me, she seems to say. I know with what, too. Coffee with cream and 2 sugars. And this time, I won't get grimaces for the flavor either. We sit in silence for a minute, enjoying the calm before the morning crowd. Maybe this would be a good time to catch up between friends. We could chat and gossip about the various happenings in town. I could ask her about her cider business and maybe give her details about Stefan's situation. But this is nice. I ran into Annabelle, she finally says after having finished her mug. With a statement like that, I know she's expecting a refill. Oh? I play coy. Maybe she'll give up and move on to something else. To put it bluntly, darling, I didn't expect you to be in this particular mood when I walked in. In fact, I came in early because I thought you would be a mess. I pause, spoonful of raw sugar hovering over her freshly filled mug. I'm holding her coffee hostage while I consider the implication. What are you accusing me of, Olivia Figg? What did Annabelle tell you, anyway? I mix in the sugar and pour in some cream. That a mutual friend of ours might have found companionship with your newest customer? The idea of Gulliver and Ophelia is a fly in my soup. It'd be dishonest to pretend otherwise. On the other hand, I hadn't given it much thought since I went to bed last night. We're already halfway through the pot of coffee by ourselves, and there are yet to be more customers in the cafe. My fingers probe the side of my own mug, feeling for the burn through the ceramic. I try to find the sting in it the same way I try to find the hurt in Gulliver's relationship. It takes a while, but it's there. Ah, yes, that. A smile manifests across my lips. I'm happy for him. Really now? I am. I don't care much for this Ophelia, but whatever he finds in her, if it makes him happy, I'm glad. Olivia leans over the counter, sliding her half-full mug of coffee aside. The way she squints at me while digging her eyes into mine, you'd think she was trying to read my DNA. Girl, as much as I love you, you'll have to forgive me if I find this sudden good mood suspicious. You don't wear it easily, if you catch my meaning. I do. It's unusual for me to be this chipper. To my friend, it must feel like I've changed haircuts or I'm wearing a new pair of glasses. I'm clearly still myself, but something is off. Am I that much of a drag to hang out with? If you must know, I explain at last, I have a date. Well, not a date, or maybe it is. Doesn't matter. I'm meeting someone for dinner tonight, and maybe it's the change of pace, but I'm really looking forward to it. Satisfaction blooms over Olivia's features. She got what she wanted, though there's clearly more tea to be spilled. Part of me is hungry to say more, to tell the story of my late-night conversation with Vicky, about the insistence in seeing me again. I want to brag about this social success like a child telling her mother about a friend she made at school. Well, then, Olivia says, adjusting the many rings on her fingers before dragging the mug back in front of her. Do you think you're in a good enough mood to try making biscotti again? I'm glad she's not pushing the issue. I know she wants to know more, because if I were in her shoes, I'd want to know more. One has to respect that level of restraint from a woman who lives and breathes gossip. Biscotti to meet your standards? Sorry, but I'm not quite at that level of hubris. She laughs, and for the first time in a while, everything feels normal. Well, as normal as Aquillow will allow itself to be. The door chimes and the customers start walking in. Soon, Annabelle joins us, and while she too gets her digs in about Gulliver's relationship, I use my upcoming dinner with Vicky to shield myself again. Eventually, the sun will have turned the sky a pure cerulean blue, and the clouds will be a herd of floating sheep of the brightest white floating over town. I'll bring out my tortilla wraps with marinated pork and eggplant for the lunch crowd, and Stefan will walk down from my apartment to start his shift. The harsh reality of his situation will wash over my mood, and I'll be thrust back into whatever tragedies this job demands I endure. But for now, I get to sit still in the eye of the storm and pretend that everything is going to be just fine. It's a cool wind that first teased the cruel fingers of reality were scratching at the door. I almost heard it before I felt it. Something in the sound of the chimes felt off, as if they too were bothered by a sudden change in the weather. In truth, they were buffeted by the wind encroaching into my little dining room. The customer they heralded brought with her a different kind of cold. Not one that crept in with the breeze, but rather the sort that grew from within. If anger is white and hot, then whatever this feeling is tends more towards the green and cold. Like a block of ice materializing in your belly, forcing everything there to congeal into a solid mass. It's a weight on the soul that makes the limbs and thoughts heavy. My brother, Eric, had a great way to describe it. Though he was referring to his anxiety, it applies to this too. It's like a computer running a bloated piece of software in the background. It doesn't stop you from thinking and doing whatever else you mean to, but it makes it all slower, more difficult. "I'll have my chai," Ophelia announces as she approaches the counter. There's a spring to her step that teeters on the brink of prancing. Her small stature doesn't help with the illusion that she's almost dancing to the register as she demands her drink of choice. Her nose, as she gets closer, twitches like a rabbit's, sniffing at the air with obvious curiosity. And I think I'm going to try one of your croissants again." Now that is an unexpected turn of events. The optimist in me, weak of voice and timid in demeanor, claims that this is just part of the string of good things that come to those with a positive outlook. It's a karmic reward for my good mood this morning. Like the coffee machine rewarding me for the care and attention I've given it, the universe is celebrating my attitude with a flip to the brighter side. The overwhelming balance of me thinks otherwise. Anxiety, paranoia, and cynicism all voice their collective concern for what this could possibly mean. Self-pity suggests that maybe she's giving my croissants another chance at Gulliver's urging. After all, the big guy loves my croissants. He loves everything I bake, and if they're seeing each other, then maybe she listens to him. "I have butter or cheese this morning," my automatic retail voice replies. "I'm afraid I already ran out of the chocolate." The last part is a bit of a lie. Ian, the leader of the cloud-worshipping Pilvists, bought all of them. He does that sometimes. If one particular croissant strikes his fancy, he'll just buy me out. "Are the butter like extra butter, or is that just a standard croissant?" I pull the reins in on my smile to keep it from being too condescending. If I'm being fair to her, all croissants are butter croissants, so it is a little redundant to call them that. But plain or normal are not qualifiers I want to apply to any of my food. So butter croissant it is. Yep, just like the one you had the other day. The specification is very much intentional. If Ophelia is going to be giving my croissants another shot, I want her to go in with her eyes open. I want her to take a bite, chew it carefully, look for something to dislike. Then, with reluctance and contrition, I want to hear her say that my croissant is lovely and she regrets not finishing the first one she ordered. Only then can the healing truly begin. In short order, the chai tea is steeped and poured into steaming milk, and the croissant is plated on top of an aquilo napkin. With a thank you and a generous smile, Ophelia pays for her food. Her large purse hanging from her shoulder, her drink in her right hand and the plate in her left, she scans the dining room for a place to sit. No, not the dining room. The counter. Her lips part as her smile widens, showing off her perfect little teeth when she spots a seat right next to Annabelle. And then she skips right over. The weight inside me grows. Ophelia leans on her elbows with her purse on her lap. Before long, the orange head of William the cat pops up, squinting green eyes surveying all around him. Thin, white fingers touch the mug to test the warmth, then pick up the chai latte for a sip. Ophelia seems satisfied, and I wait with anticipation for her to take a bite, a nibble, or even a crumb of my croissant, but she instead turns to chat it up with Annabelle. Miriam! And the weight implodes. Whatever this feeling is, whether it's cold jealousy or icy resentment, it collapses into itself at the mention of my name. Adele Remington. I don't know what I imagined had happened with the shrieking harpy upon her return to Aquilo. Not that I'd forgotten about how Ophelia swooped in and robbed me of my last chance to make things right with Julia. Who could forget that? But between helping Stefan, Nancy, Vicky, and that weirdo Patience, I didn't have time to put any thought into it, or into what became of Julia since that night. If asked, however, I would have said that I hoped Gary, getting his final rest, would somehow chase Adele out of town. I'm not sure what chain of events I thought could have resulted in that outcome. It just seemed like the most desirable one. For once, I didn't quite care about the recipe. I ordered coffee, she says, presumably repeating herself from before. 2 milk, 2 sugars. Almond milk or cow juice? Almond, she answers. Which is probably the best choice, as I suspect her voice would curdle any real dairy product in her immediate vicinity. You can only mix so much vitriol into milk and cream before they curdle. I can feel her stare as I work to pour coffee into her not a morning person travel mug. It's almost a shame to waste some of the best coffee I've made in a week on this woman. I carefully measure out 2 tablespoons of sugar, allowing myself the harmless fantasy of imagining it to be strychnine instead, before pouring in the required amount of almond milk. I give the concoction a little stir, making a point to go counterclockwise, before giving Adele her mug back. Bright red acrylic fingernails are pressed atop a $5 bill, which she slides towards me without looking. Her eyes, like those of a particularly nasty vulture, still burning my skin with their intensity. You did something to my mother, she claims in a hiss. My own fingers find the bill and tug at it, but it won't budge. Pull as I may, I'm more likely to rip the money than remove it from the crimson claws of Adele Remington. I wouldn't know what you're talking about. It's not as bold a claim as I make it sound. Ophelia was the one who did something. I can hear her, right now, laughing in unison with Annabelle. The weight returns, greener and heavier than ever. My friend is being entertained by this pretender while I have to deal with the fallout of her actions. She gets the success, but I have to suffer the consequences. I want to be back there, asking Annabelle about that book on mixology, or feeding Olivia her own apples back to her in the form of the donuts I baked this morning. Instead, I have to weather the caustic words of this animated gargoyle. For what? Less than the value of a fast food combo meal? My own heartbeat drowns out the sounds of laughs and chatter. The blood in my veins rushes, isolating me from everything but my own voice and that of Adele. Through my boiling anatomy, I've locked us in a soundproof box, away from the dining room and away from Aquilo itself. Listen to me carefully. I seethe the words into existence. Your mother is my friend. There is nothing you can do about that. If I want to see Julia, I will see Julia. And maybe we'll have a talk about how her greedy daughter is encroaching on her life, burrowing into the very skin of her home like a parasite sucking at the blood and weakening the host. Maybe I'll remind Julia, my friend, that this same daughter was nowhere to be seen when she was at her very lowest. How about that, Adele? I see lips move, but I can't hear her words. I can see fear and confusion in her eyes, but it's not enough. Her nails still dig into my counter. What I want is her surrender, and she isn't giving it. Faster than I thought myself capable, and with more force than I probably should, I grab the spoon from my apron pocket. With a simple twirl and a flick of the wrist, I bring the tip down on the back of Adele's hand. It's the kind of strike a practiced schoolteacher from the last century might have performed. Less attack and more discipline. She lets go, eyes wide and stepping back. I want to say that I don't know what came over me, that emotion guided my hand, but even now, watching Adele clutch her knuckles before grabbing her mug and running out, I have no regret. This is my coffee shop and my dining room, and I will not be bullied here. Sound returns as I open the register to put the $5 bill in. I take the difference between the money and the price of her coffee, putting it in the tip jar. The clicking of metal coins as they fall in seems cold and a little distant, as if it too was offended by my attitude. Looking back, I can read worry in Annabelle's face, her right eyebrow curving higher than the left and her hand flat on the page of her textbook, almost shielding the content from my outburst. She doesn't say anything, though. No one does. The dining room barely noticed my outburst, and those that did lack context anyways. They probably think this was nothing but a simple customer service dispute. With a little luck, I can sweep this under the rug and lie to myself that it was not at all out of proportion to the situation. "Well done," Ophelia says, still sitting over her uneaten croissant. She claps her frail white hands together in quiet applause that no one shares. "She deserved that." And that is how I know I messed up. Imagine, if you will, a fly in your soup. Not just any fly, either. This isn't a tiny fruit fly floating dead on the surface of your minestrone. This is a big, late summer fly. You can see the texture in its multifaceted eyes, and you can almost count the hairs on its rotund body. Its wings are stuck to the broth, unable to buzz and carry the offending insect out of the meal. 6 legs twitch helplessly, struggling to find purchase in empty air. This is also not just any soup. This is your dinner and lunch, your whole nourishment for the day, all in one bowl. There's no replacement coming, and no time to flag down a waiter to order anything else. There's no bread to accompany your soup either. This is it. Now imagine that, somehow, you've offended that fly. After all, it can't help being a fly. It didn't end up fouling your delicious minestrone on purpose. It's here by accident or by some cruel twist of fate. Whatever happens next, whether you kill the fly or flick it out of the soup and allow it to escape, doesn't matter. What matters is that now, somehow, you have to think of a way to apologize for offending the fly. That is how I feel working at my cafe for the rest of the morning. No matter how much of a fly in my soup Adele Remington has been since the very first minute she stepped into the Aquila with her fake designer shoes, she's been that fly in my soup. And I thought I was perfectly justified in chewing the air between us before sending her on her way. It sure felt good to do it. However, seeing, of all people, Ophelia cheer me on was all that it took to make me regret my actions. Adele is Julia's daughter, and no matter how much I want to watch her fight a moose in single combat, I should show some amount of civility. Civility, my secret weapon. "I don't think you have to say you're sorry," Annabelle explains. "But maybe water down that wine next time. Far from me to suggest such a basic attitude, but have you tried being passive-aggressive? My mom does it, and let me tell you, 1,000 swords can't cut as deep as when that woman wants a room cleaned but can't be bothered to ask." Ophelia chuckles. All of my good mood and optimism from the morning has leaked out, all from that encounter with Adele. And Ophelia, like a sponge, has collected all of it for herself imbibing every last drop until there was nothing left for me. "I disagree," she proclaims, as if an authority on the subject. "Adele is a tick. She's a parasite. If we're lucky, all she does is suck our blood. But chances are, especially with as gross a specimen as she is, we'll catch something nasty should she remain attached too long. Best to burn her and pluck her body from our skin as soon as possible." The analogy isn't without merit, especially if we consider Julia to be the skin to which Adele is attached. But she's Julia's daughter, I explain, contrite. It doesn't matter how much of an onion in ice cream she is. I should still show some measure of self-control when dealing with her, if only so I don't damage my relationship with Julia by proxy. I'm glad to see Annabelle nod her agreement, and I hope that this is enough to quiet further discussion. I'd much rather mull over my misdeeds and run pretend scenarios or reconciliations in my head than debate them with Ophelia. Alas. "You're wrong," she insists. "Julia knows you and she knows her daughter. She'll get it. Mark my words. You can burn all the bridges between you and Adele Remington and lose nothing of your relationship with her mother." She punctuates every part of her comment with her index finger, tapping on the wooden counter right next to her plate. Her plate with that accursed, intact butter croissant. Ophelia is like a demon sitting on my shoulder, whispering the worst advice into my ear. My most vile urges made manifest. Except she has so far been so infuriatingly successful that I can't help but lean in and listen. I very desperately want out of the conversation. A furtive glance at the register's clock tells me I'm still a solid hour from Stefan taking over my shift. But that's assuming he doesn't choose today to take off and confront the heavy burden that weighs on him. Which means I'd be stuck here with Ophelia for as long as she chooses to stay. Her croissant remains untouched, and whatever knitting project she's assigned herself is barely started. I can't even tell if it's going to be another sweater or a shawl. All I can say so far is that it will be red. What's this? I pull at a book from the pile next to Annabelle. It's her mixology book. On the cover is an aged photograph of a martini glass, its contents splashing out dramatically as an olive is dropped in. Thick, impact lettering spell out ultimate bartending. It all looks dreadfully serious. "Oh, that?" She plays coy. "Just a little side project." Ophelia, ever in other people's business, leans in to take a look. Her mouth forms a perfect O, and if I didn't know better, in that moment, I'd have sworn she was 84 years old. If she had pearls, she'd clutch them. Instead, she shields the eyes of the cat sitting in her lap. "Are you even old enough to drink?" she asks. No, not asks. Accuses. Glad to know she's not like this only with me. "I would never," Annabelle reassures. "This is purely theoretical." Her lie is so bold and transparent that I expect the sarcasm of it to offend Ophelia. I've seen Annabelle drink enough to knock even Gulliver unconscious. She drinks like only someone on the very brink of being allowed to drink can. And, as expected, Ophelia seems unconvinced, frowning like a nun in a brothel. "I'm studying biology." Annabelle rushes in to shore up her fib. "We cover the effects of alcohol in the body, and I got curious." "Besides," I add, "you've been 17 before, Ophelia, right?" Judging by the blush and the averted eyes, I would almost guess that the answer is no, she hasn't. The sudden, unexpected embarrassment is what does it. With nothing else to say and nowhere to hide, Ophelia tries knitting for a second. Her heart isn't into it, however. Trying to put herself back together, either by accident or because she lacks options, Ophelia picks up the butter croissant and takes a furious bite out of it. She chews like she's trying to avenge a loved one, each churning of her jaw a fresh and vindictive assault upon the soft flesh of that poor croissant. But she doesn't spit it out, and she doesn't gag. In fact, Ophelia's features soften. The flushing of her cheeks settles into a pleasant rosy tint. Even her frown is knocked off her face, replaced by those laugh lines I first noticed when she originally came into the Aquilo. "Have I ever told you," she says, after swallowing and ripping off a fresh piece to eat, "that your croissants are wonderful?" "No," I spit out, half furious and half confused. "You certainly have not." Her smile explodes and her eyes disappear behind squinting eyelids. "Well, they are." The way she says it makes it seem like I should be grateful for her sudden and somehow backhanded change of opinion. "They taste like the day is going to be a good one." For the first time in my short yet eventful life, I want someone to dislike my cooking. Well, not really. Who am I kidding? Even from Ophelia, and even under these bonkers circumstances, I feed on the compliment like yeast on sugar. It's close, though. That's how much I dislike the aftertaste of her approval. There's an all-consuming struggle inside me as to how I'm supposed to answer this, and I'm very tempted to take Ophelia's own recommendation. If I can spit out the awful truth of how I feel about Adele Remington to her face, I can confront this hypocrite about how she once told me my croissant tasted of anger. Thankfully, I don't have time to come up with the proper barb to fling in her direction. The chimes of the Aquilo door, as they often do, interrupt me like an omen. Whether they promise good news or bad, they tend to usher in change, and this is no different. As I turn, the sunlight of the late morning drops in like a massive glob of honey through the door. Sweeter still is the sight of Vicky Paramore. I don't know what will come of this friendship. Maybe I just get a new pal who's easy on the eyes. Maybe more, but at the very least I hope to get someone in my life who can offer some solid fashion tips. She is dressed perfectly for the weather. Her ensemble coordinates with the autumn sunshine, composed of a matching red shawl and beret over a pair of pale denim jeans. Where Ophelia wears her beret like an awkward middle-aged woman, Vicky has hers placed at just the right angle. A photographer could spring out from behind a car on the street to take a few quick shots, and I would think nothing of it. She is impeccable. Reluctant to pull my eyes away, I take out a mug and pour some boiling water into it. A quick foraging behind the counter, and I find a pouch of green tea to drop in. I fuss to get some cream when I notice her looking at me from behind the register. Having caught my attention, she does something most of my regulars don't need to do, especially those I know on a first-name basis. Most especially those with whom I have dinner plans this very evening. She places an order. "Hello," she says, perfect teeth on display, ready to melt any heart that comes too close. "Can I have a non-fat half-calf mocha Valencia and a pan au chocolat, please?" Aquilo is written by J.F. Dubow and narrated and produced by me, Amy Frost. If you enjoyed this podcast and would like to hear more, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast platform. Want to support the show? Buy us a coffee. Go to ko-fi.com/Aquilo to donate. Aquilo has a Patreon. Visit patreon.com/Aquilo for details. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram under the username Aquilo.